Well, hello and welcome to our program today on Heritage Poultry. I'm very pleased to have Emily Shoop, who is a 4-H educator from Juniata County, come to see us and talk about her enthusiasm for poultry and particularly heritage breeds. Emily will be explaining a little bit about her 4-H role, but for reading her bio, she has shown poultry since she was 3 years old with her father. So has a lot of experience. I also want to mention our upcoming programs. Our next brown bag is March 13th. Candace is giving that, our curator, and the topic is Fastnachts and Fish Friday, eating our way through Carnival and Lent. So with that very serious topic, I'm sure you'll want to be here. And on Sunday, March 17th, Will Weaver is going to be speaking on the Pennsylvania Dutch garden and heirloom vegetables. He is a food historian of note. He's authored a number of books and also has an heirloom vegetable seed collection. He will have some of his vegetable varieties seeds here to purchase and some of his books. And that program will be $5. And you can pay that at the door. Please sign up ahead of time so we have an idea of how many people are coming.
When is that again?
Sunday, March 17th at 2. And we're on the last leg of our annual appeal campaign, and we would like to reach your goal. So if any of you want to contribute today, we have boxes downstairs for contributions, and that is very much appreciated. So thank you. I'm looking forward to hearing and learning about heritage breeds.
Yes. Can everybody hear me okay on Zoom?
And in the room.
And in the room, yeah. I tend to be a little mousy anymore. I don't get out much. And we'll talk about why. But thank you so much to Sarah and Beth for inviting me today. Like I said, I don't get out much, but it's been a few years since I've been to this side of the state. I tend to stay in central Pennsylvania for most of my work, but I did some programs in Ole in the past at their feed store, Ole Valley Feeds. Lots of backyard chicken presentations. So we'll go ahead and no. Oh, this doesn't like me. That's okay. I'm standing right here. What do I need it for? All right. So I work for Penn State Extension. 4-H is an extension of Penn State Extension, which is an extension of Penn State. So we believe that all people should have access to science-based education. And today, what I'll be giving you is that science-based education around small flocks and heritage breeds specifically. We meet your needs online or on site. We have a lot of online courses, tons of backyard poultry things that are available on our website, extension.psu.edu. If you're not familiar with us, you can get signed up. We have a little bit of everything from apples to zebras. We do a little bit of everything. I used to serve on the animal systems team. So I was a poultry educator for 7 years. In 2022, April 2022, I switched to 4-H. I was a 4-H'er. As Sarah said, I've been raising chickens since I was 3. I turned 33 last month, so it's been a long time. And I was a 4-H'er. I did 12 years of 4-H. I was a clover bud as well. And my dad shows poultry. We've been into it for a long time. I got the best of both worlds when it comes to hobbies. My mom is a quilter and an incredible seamstress. So I inherited like 1/3 of her ability. I do a lot of cross stitch because I can watch TV and do that. So I do a lot of cross stitch now. I do some quilting. I'm not very good at it, but I do a little bit of quilting. So seeing these is inspiring for me. Not an attainable inspiration, but it's really nice to see some other people's quilt work. And then my dad is a huge agriculturalist. He has a huge garden that was passed down from his grandfather and his father. I have a black thumb, so don't ask me to come to the gardening workshop. I'll kill all your seeds. Not much of a gardener, but I do. We raise beef cattle on our farm. My husband grows hay and some row crops. And then I have my sad little 5 chickens. We had a disease come through and wipe out a lot of my birds and had to start over a little bit, but we'll talk about that in a little bit here. So yeah, like I said, I missed being around kids. So I moved to the 4-H team, and I still have some responsibility with poultry through the 4-H kids. So I am the chair of the farm show poultry committee, and fingers crossed we can actually have some poultry at the farm show next year instead of just pictures, for those kids to be able to show off their projects. They work really hard. So I'd like to see them show those things off. But like I said, these are some of the things that 4-H, or sorry, extension covers, including one of them being 4-H and youth development. If you are recording, and if you need anything, you need me to share these slides, I'm happy to share them with Sarah and she can get them out to you somehow, or you can contact me directly. That's no problem. This is our veterinary advice statement. So nothing I say today can be used in place of a veterinarian. I did 1 semester of vet school and it wasn't for me. So I came to extension. I took the easy road, which is not the easy road, it turns out, but please consult a veterinarian if you have any veterinary medical issues. I am just not able to give that advice because I'm not licensed to. And the university is always committed to equal access for programs. So that statement is there as well. Now let's go ahead and get started. Okay, this is me. You also can see me. That's great. This is my husband, Derek, and our daughter, Molly. She's 9 months old. She is precious and I love her. And I will talk about her every day. But I'm based in Juniata County. We live in the very southern tip. Go to the top of our mountain. I can see Huntingdon, Perry, and Mifflin County, even if I look real hard. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in poultry science from the University of Arkansas. I grew up in Ohio, so I'm from everywhere but here. I grew up in Ohio for 18 years, moved to Arkansas, lived there for about 10, and then came to Pennsylvania as an extension agent. Yeah, I've been involved in poultry for a long time, and I am a licensed judge in the American Bantam Association, working on my license for the American Poultry Association. That's a 5-year program, so we're getting there. I had a couple setbacks last 9 months where I had a little one to take care of. So that's kind of put a damper on my licensing program, but I'm also a life member in both of those associations, as is my dad. We tend to come together as a team because that's convenient, right? And so daddy-daughter Jay will go to California and judge a chicken show, or we'll go to Indiana, Ohio. We judge a lot regionally as well. But like I said, had a couple hiccups here recently. Haven't been out to many shows. But when we talk about poultry, we're really familiar with chickens, right? Ducks, geese. But there's a lot more that encompasses poultry than just the birds that we eat, the eggs that we may consume, the feathers that we use. What we can't consider poultry are pigeons and doves. They are not regulated as poultry in the state of Pennsylvania or nationally even. Which is convenient for the Pigeon Growers Association out of Reading. They are not regulated the same. They can still have their big pigeon show in Lancaster each year, which we actually attended a couple weeks ago. It was really cool. It's different from a chicken show. You walk into a chicken show, it's really loud. There's birds crowing and peeping and cheeping, and there's just a lot of racket. You walk into a pigeon show and it's silence. It's just really nice. It's a nice welcome change from a chicken show. Any of our wild or perching bird species are typically not considered poultry. The caveat to that would be swans. We can consider them poultry. So some poultry terms, anything that you can use for their meat, eggs, or feathers. Ostriches fall into that category very nicely. We can use their hides for leather, as well as some countries do use them for their meat. I've been recently very involved with the Pennsylvania Department of Ag with this high path AI, the avian influenza bird flu outbreak we've had. And when we talk about showing birds, they always include ratites. So that's our ostriches, emus, rheas, cassowaries, the big scary dinosaur birds. And they talk about the ways that we need to show an ostrich. And I just think, don't tell my children that. Don't tell my 4-H kids they can show an ostrich, because an ostrich will show up at my fair. And I don't know if I have a pen big enough for that. So when we do talk about poultry, it's those things that we recognize pretty readily, and some that we may not. So again, just breaking that out a little further, here's some interesting type birds. So we've got broiler chickens and our meat type birds, turkeys, We love those around Thanksgiving. Waterfowl, in Mifflin County, we have St. Michaelmas Day or Goose Day. That's a big deal. Everybody gets excited to eat their goose on September 29th. Our game birds, so pheasants, any of those that you might hunt wild, and then ratites are big scary dinosaur birds. The layer chickens, we can use waterfowl for eggs, game bird eggs as well. A lot of people like quail eggs. Little tiny quail eggs, you might need 7 or 8 for a cake, but they're pretty neat. And then the specialty chickens, again, your game birds. You have ornamental pheasants. There's a guy down in Lancaster County who has some really interesting rare breeds of ornamental pheasants, and it's always cool to see him on Facebook posting these really just beautifully colorful pheasants. Because when I think of pheasant, I think of the one that's in my backyard and makes lots of noise. I don't think of these yellow and purple colored pheasants. Peafowl, one of the ones that we use for our feathers. If you go down to the farm show, you usually see 500 or 600 kids running around with giant peacock feathers. That's another industry that in Pennsylvania, we have the largest peafowl producer and the largest peafowl hatchery. He's actually out of Northumberland County. So if you're interested in peafowl, we'll talk about that. And then waterfowl and ratites, we do use waterfowl feathers for down jackets and coats, things like that, down bedding. And then your ratites for their leather and feathers. They usually are pretty ornamental as well. So when you're thinking about raising poultry, or even if you're in the middle of raising poultry, or you've been raising poultry for many, many years, the choices that you make should always reflect your overall goals. My overall goal is never going to be to eat my show chickens. I won't get much more than a nugget. They're just little guys. So my choices then are as far as feed and their housing, their care, and the breeds that I might choose have to reflect that goal that I'm not going to eat them, I'm going to show them. Now my 4-H kids are only really able to show market birds this year. So their goals are going to look a little different from mine because they're going to be on the opposite side of that spectrum. Feed is always a question I get. If I feed the best feed or the most expensive feed on the market, am I going to get more eggs? Maybe not. Depends. It depends. Everything depends, right? But feed is really shouldn't reflect your goals. If you can afford to feed organic feed, by all means, go ahead and do that. If you can afford to mix your own, by all means, do that. Make sure that your ration is science-based. But if you can afford to throw some seed corn out or some field corn out to your birds, and they are outside foragers and they're doing great, laying eggs and doing what you need to do, those overall goals for you are perfect. And it really depends on each situation. There's no perfect way to raise a chicken. And that's why during COVID, everybody got birds. And then in 2021, everybody figured out that they weren't allowed to have birds in their township, and they called me. And then in 2022, I quit. So that was kind of the progression. It was 2020. It was, oh my gosh, all these hatcheries are selling out. What are we going to do? We have to provide education to these people who have never raised livestock before and now have chickens. Then they found out they shouldn't have those birds, or they were going back to work. Their kids weren't home. They were getting back out into their regular lifestyle and figured these birds are the low hanging fruit. They're going to kick the bucket. They're out of here. Where are we going to send these birds? And a lot of folks called me and said, hey, can you take my chickens? And I'm like, no, I have room for 5. So 5 chickens stay at my house, and that's it. Rehoming birds and figuring out about those township issues was all of 2021 for me. And then 2022, I moved to 4-H. There's a big reason for that. I was a little tired of talking about chickens, but then here I am today. So it comes around full circle, and I'm never really that tired of talking about chickens. When we talk about species, breed, and strain, there are over 250 breeds of chickens, species, strains, etc. When we talk about species, that's the different types of poultry: our chickens, ducks, geese, turkeys, guineas, game birds, doves, etc. When we talk about breeds, that is our specific name for a group of chickens that have similar characteristics. So Orpingtons, people are really familiar with buff Orpingtons. Orpington is that breed. Most of the time, the breed name is it a tribute to where those birds originated? So the heritage of those birds. Then the variety is the color or color pattern. I'll show you lots of colors and color patterns that we've got here. And then strains are kind of a newer thing. It's what the commercial industry or our hatchery industries have developed that are their trademark. So when we talk about Cornish crosses, yes, in the 1950s, the Cornish cross was the thing. The Chicken of Tomorrow contest you may be familiar with. We were going to create a chicken that could lay eggs and produce meat, and it was going to be the most efficient bird on the market. They took a Cornish chicken and a Plymouth Rock, crossed them together and created a Cornish Rock cross. What we are breeding today is far from a Cornish Rock cross. It is its own strain now. It's become its own thing. And they sell Cornish Rocks at lots of hatcheries. You might see them at Tractor Supply, Rural King, your farm stores. But I'm going to move this guy down just a hair. Yeah, okay. But like I said, they are far from that original Cornish Rock cross. They have their own breed strain characteristics. They don't behave like either breed. They're their own thing now. In 50 years, the Labradoodle will be its own thing. It's kind of the same. They will be so far removed from a Labrador and a Poodle that it will be its own Heinz 57 type dog that people are really looking for, with the traits of the hypoallergenic, the docility of a Labrador, things like that. Easter eggers or olive eggers, they are I would say, amalgam of lots of breeds, but one of those being the Americana or Araucana for the blue-green eggs. So they lay a colored egg. Then the Easter egger, olive eggers have been bred with other color patterns to create a prettier bird, still with that genetics to lay a blue-green tinted egg. Isa Browns, they are really heavy egg layers. A lot of these strains I would not consider heritage breeds. They were developed past 1950, even more recent than that. So they have a very short heritage, if you will, but they were developed from traditional heritage breeds. So the Livestock Conservancy is who sets our guidelines and rules for what a heritage bird in the US looks like. So it has to be an American Poultry Association standard breed. And I think these are really tiny. I'll sum them up for you. You don't have to try to read them. But a heritage chicken has to be of parent or grandparent stock of a purebred bird. So I can't take that Labradoodle, breed it back to a Labrador and have a heritage bird. It has to be of purebred stock. Those birds ideally were brought to the Americas or developed in the mid 20th century. So that makes their genetic line trace back multiple generations, and those traits should meet the standard of perfection. Many people aren't familiar with the standard of perfection, but if you've ever watched the Westminster Dog Show, it's what those judges are looking at those dogs. They're critiquing the type, the placement of the tail, the gait that those dogs have, their teeth. All those different traits are listed in our standards of perfection for chickens. And so our heritage birds really do need to meet most, if not all, of those standards. And heritage eggs obviously have to be laid by a heritage bird. We can't create heritage eggs out of thin air. They have to be naturally mating. If you're familiar with dogs, I go back to dogs because we showed dogs before we showed poultry. So the bulldogs, for the most part, modern bulldogs are not naturally mating. Most of them are, they do AI with them, or their pups are born via cesarean section because they've been bred so much that they can't naturally mate. Our modern commercial turkeys are that way. They are all done AI. And if you've ever worked in a commercial turkey house, you know what I'm talking about. That was the worst week of poultry science of my life. It was being in the pit where toms were thrown on top of me and we were to help them do their job to those sweet little hens. It was not a fun time. I don't recommend it if you're faint of heart like I am. I'm just too soft-hearted for that. So they have to be naturally mating. And then long productive outdoor lifespan. That's the key there. They do want these birds to be outdoor. That's part of the heritage. And hundreds of years ago, or even more recently, birds weren't raised out or inside. They were raised outside. They were rangy. They had vigor. They were kind of like the kids of that generation, right? they were the streetlight kids. When the streetlights come on, you better go home. Same with the chickens. Latchkey kids. I was a latchkey kid, so we'll call the chickens the same thing. And we really would like these breeding hens to be productive for a long lifespan. Lifespan of a chicken is anywhere from 3 to 7 years. So that's about where we'd like. Now, chickens can live much longer than that, but are they having a productive life after that 7 years? I love when people say, oh, this bird will lay 250 eggs a year. For about 6 months. They will lay 250 eggs a year for 6 months. They peak, just like humans in their reproductive life. We peak at a certain age and then we taper off. Chickens do go through menopause too. Roosters are fertile for most of their life, but their fertility definitely drops off with age. So again, a long productive life in that outdoor lifestyle. And also a slow growth rate. Modern broiler chickens are, I think the last time I had a conversation with a poultry grower that had chicken houses, it was a 42-day pickup. So in 42 days, they go from peeping to full grown bird. And whether we believe that's bad or good, heritage breeds have to have that slow growth rate. They put on frame, they put on bone, and they put on muscle before they grow to that marketable weight. Usually in no less than 16 weeks. Now, if you're raising heritage breeds and you want meat tomorrow, I don't recommend that. Your overall goal there is not going to reflect well. You might want to look for a broiler chicken in that instance. But if you're willing to wait 16 weeks or longer, I was reading the signs out here, which was just incredible, that the lard press that's out in the hallway is the same lard press we use when we butcher hogs at home. It is the exact same one, I'm pretty confident. So we render our own lard, we make cracklins and all of that. My father-in-law and I get extremely sick on cracklins the week before Thanksgiving when we butcher hogs. But the signs out there were talking about Sunday dinners or something special. That's when you would process your excess roosters. I remember my great grandma and her chopping block with her axe. We all probably have that story. You know, I know I'm one of the younger ones in the room, but I remember it too. My great grandma was a tough old woman. She'd wring necks and chop the heads off, and it was a horrible, traumatic experience for a 7-year-old. But I turned out okay. I still like chickens. I still like to eat chicken. But that slow growth rate really lends to that. You can use those birds as a dual purpose breed. They can breed your hens, produce eggs, and then produce chicks. And then when they're done with their useful life, or they're noisy, or they're aggressive, or your township says you can't have any roosters, they make great Sunday dinner or Sunday dinner for someone. It doesn't have to be you. So in summary, a heritage egg can only be produced by an APA standard breed. That heritage chicken is hatched from a heritage egg sired by an APA standard breed, established prior to the mid-20th century, is slow growing, naturally mated, and has a long productive outdoor life. Long story short there. So we have egg type chickens. These are our breeds that really are truly egg type. And this is where I name my pony. Pony gonna work? Okay. So here's what we would consider a heritage type leghorn. So foghorn leghorn, yeah, he was white with a brown hackle. This is foghorn leghorn's sister. This is what we would call a light brown leghorn. Very different from our commercial leghorns that are producing the white eggs you find in the grocery store. These still produce a white egg because they have a white earlobe. That's the rule of thumb here. White earlobe produces a white egg. A colored earlobe will produce a tinted egg. So whether that's green or blue, dark chocolate brown, or brown. So you can see most of these breeds here have white earlobes. That's so this is a light brown leghorn. Ancona chicken. There's also an Ancona duck. Don't confuse the two. It's pretty easy to tell them apart, I promise. But they're both black and spotted. So our Ancona chicken, blue Andalusian, those are really popular because they're pretty. They're one of the true blue birds. So they have this slate color with really dark slate lacing. Very striking bird when you see them, and when they're done really, really well. This is a black Minorca. She has white earlobes. You can barely see them there. A Welsummer, they do lay brown eggs. They have that brown or red earlobe. So those birds are going to be the ones that you want to raise if you just want eggs. You don't want to ever process the males, or you don't ever want to eat your chickens. I would stick with these guys. They're high volume egg layers. So they're going to peak and stay at that peak of reproduction for a good long time. I raised leghorns as a kid, and my dad has a few now. They will lay for 3 or 4 years, steady, egg a day. Just pump them out. Now that's with the caveat of if you have good productive layers. I did have one that never laid an egg. I don't know what her problem was. We had lots of long talks in the barn, like, listen, sis, you gotta get it together. I can't make any more of you if you don't help me out. So like I said, these are usually our high volume egg layers. But if you were to process these, now I've seen people that have black Minorcas that have huge males, and they do process them. But if you're going to raise this flock for meat, they're like the sailboats of the chicken world. They're long, they're deep, and they're skinny. They don't, now all of these are kind of on the profile, but if I would turn them sideways, they'd almost disappear. Like if they were looking at you, there's not much there. So again, you're not going to get much more than a nugget. What we use these commercially for are stewing hens. So once these are done with their useful life, that meat then goes into Campbell's soup. Probably shouldn't use the brand name, but that's typically what we use here. It's our stewing hens and what we render down for bone broth and things like that. If you just want meat, don't want a whole lot of volume of eggs, you're not looking for the both aspects of that. Cornish. So this is a Bantam Cornish. That's just a little guy. Bantams are 1/5 the size of a standard size chicken, and most of what I'm talking about today are the standard size ones. I raise Bantams because I don't have a lot of space. People typically have standard size chickens. That's starting to go by the wayside in the show side of things because you need a ton of resource and a ton of space to raise these big birds. Cornish though come in lots of shapes and colors, but they are a really broad-breasted bird. And that's why we use them to develop our broiler chickens, because they pack on a lot of meat really quickly, but they have these tiny little legs and these tiny little legs typically can't support all of that mass. So when we talk about a Cornish, a true Cornish, not a Cornish cross, they grow a lot slower. They put on that frame before their legs go out from underneath them, basically. They're kind of like the bodybuilders of the chicken world. They come in lots of pretty colors. I enjoy Cornish, but they are a gamey fowl, so they can be a little aggressive because they look like bulldogs. I think they look like a bulldog. They just look a little mean. Most of the time, they're very pleasant. The really cool thing about Cornish is they're the only type of poultry that have a pearl colored eye. So they almost have a white colored eye. They should, keyword should. So you can see this guy here, it looks like he has a white iris. That's because he should. So the Cornish, that's really what you're looking for if you just want meat and you want a heritage bird. Now, if you want something for both, you want eggs and meat. I've got white chickens, I've got black chickens, I've got red chickens, I've got stripy chickens, I've got spotted chickens, I've got patterned chickens, and I've got more patterned chickens and the funny looking ones. Now I'll go back and go over these, I promise, but there is something for you, I promise. So we'll go back to the beginning. Sorry for those on Zoom, they're going through the time warp there, but like I said, they come in all shapes and colors. But our dual purpose breeds are going to be big bodied males with a moderate bodied female that at the end of their useful life can be used for meat. A lot of folks say, I could never eat my own chicken. Well, you've never been pecked or torn apart by one. I have more scars from chickens and rabbits than I'll ever have from a beef cow, I promise. So what we've got here is a Chanticleer. I actually raise these in the Bantam size. I think they're fun little birds. They're spunky. They have kind of an attitude, especially the Bantams, because all Bantams have little man syndrome. They think they're Napoleon complex. They're all they're little and they think they're a lot bigger than they are. Some of these guys are the opposite of that. They're the Great Danes. They think they're lap dogs. So they don't realize how big they are and they can get into trouble that way. This is our Plymouth Rock. This is a white Plymouth Rock for this example. I always say they're shaped like a heart, and that's the way they should be. But again, developed in Massachusetts near Plymouth Rock. And that's again another big bodied bird. They use the Cornish for the meat propensity, and then the Plymouth Rock for the reproductive aspect. And then we have a Delaware. That's a Delaware hen. They have that Colombian pattern, which we would call the black hackle and black tip tail, black tip wings, and the rest of the body is white. Again, deep bodied bird. These are all American breeds. Even the Chanticleer was developed in Canada. It's the only one of the American breeds that was developed in Canada. Don't tell anyone you didn't learn anything today. As far as our blackbirds, the problem with these birds, tell me the difference. They're all big black chickens, right? Now, if I had these three here in cages and showed you these, you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference just looking at them. When I pick them up and look at the bottoms of their feet, that's three distinct breeds. All right. So here we have an Australorp. An Australorp is shaped like a U. So if I would have showed a picture of a male, you might have been able to tell the difference. But an Australorp is a big black chicken with a back line that's shaped exactly like a U. She's got it there, but she's a young poet. The male in the middle is a Jersey Giant. Now, the name implies that they should be bigger than that, and they are typically. Show type ones are bigger than that. The ones you might get from a hatchery might not get entirely that big, but they are technically one of the largest chicken breeds. And then this lady down here is a black Orpington. The difference here is that you can't see her feet. They're so fluffy. They're a lot of feather, but that helps them with winter hardiness. So she's got a lot of fluff down here to protect those vulnerable scales and feet. If I pick her up, she has pink feet. If I pick her up, she has yellow feet. Or she should have black feet, excuse me. If I pick his girlfriend up, she should have yellow feet. And that's the difference between the three of them. When I'm judging a class of big black chickens, and they all tell me that they're Australorps, the first thing I do is pick them up and look at their feet color, because I can tell if you're crossbreeding. Most of the time, they will put Orpingtons on Jersey Giants or Jersey Giants on Orpingtons to make sure they're big. Well, that messes with the foot color, and I can, you didn't trick me. But that's, my dad and I both, we never really raised these because we consider them big black chickens. And it was so hard to distinguish between the breed types that if one bird would jump the fence, then the whole breeding program was down the tank, because we couldn't really tell the difference between those big black chickens. Now we have big red chickens, kind of the same thing, right? Here we have a Rhode Island red. Actually, no, that's a Buckeye. Buckeyes have a pea comb, so it's just a little guy with no points. Buckeye, big red chicken. That is a New Hampshire red. The difference there is she's got kind of the Colombian pattern with the black hackle and black tip tail, but a red base instead of white. Then this is a Rhode Island red. It's not a very good one, but it's a Rhode Island red, I promise. More of a mahogany bird shaped like a rectangle with black tip tail, black tip wings. But again, big red chickens, they all have different breed type characteristics, but all lay brown eggs and are great dual purpose breeds. I've raised all of these at some point in my life and very docile. I don't know what it is about red chickens, but they just seem to be relaxed. Right, except for the roosters. Now, I will say this, that I am a chicken. I am a total chicken when it comes to being around my roosters. I have a couple at home that my husband feeds because I don't like them. They're mean. They're there for a purpose, and they will be eliminated as soon as my breeding season is over. But yeah, the red roosters tend to be very aggressive. If you have a whole hen flock, they're really docile. Then we have our stripy birds. So our Dominiques, Sarah was telling me about our Dominiques. They have a rose comb as opposed to a single comb. So they've got kind of the lumpy, beefy comb, whereas these guys have the points. I talk with my hands, can you tell? But the barring pattern is slightly different, just slightly. A Dominique's barring pattern looks like this, whereas a Plymouth Rock is straight across. So if you hold up two feathers next to each other in a wing or even in some of these body feathers, they're staggered on a Dominique and straight across on a barred rock. Then we have a Barnvelder, I believe, over here. Or no, actually, it's Cuckoo Moran. She's got feathers on her feet. See, I can judge chickens. I only studied for 3 years to do that. This is a Cuckoo Moran. So she's got feathers on her feet. She lays a very dark chocolate brown egg. That's the hallmark of that Moran breed. They come in a million colors too. Cuckoo's just one of them. So Cuckoo here is a variegated barring, much like our Dominique, but with a little bit of red tint along with it. So it's a fun chicken, stripy chicken. Then we have our spotty chickens. So here we have a speckled Sussex. That speckled Sussex, is another English type breed, but it's very hardy, docile because it's got the red genes, but a little bit different. And I think they're really pretty. If I had room, I'd raise 1,000,000 of them, but, I just don't have room. So then we have our mottled Java. These are really rare. If you find some, congratulations, but there's just not very many in the US. There's just not many worldwide. That breed is hard to raise, in that there's not a lot of genetic diversity across the globe. So you're creating a lot of inbreeding when we're breeding these together. So that's why they died out. A lot of the bigger breeders got out of them. And then that genetic stock just hasn't stuck around. But Javas are an American breed as well. They are a big, deep-bodied bird. You can see on the, not profile, what am I looking at? Looking at them straight on, they're a wide breed as well. So they make a good dual-purpose breed. Then we got our pattern birds, which these are the fun ones. These ones you might be familiar with too. This is a light Brahma. They come in dark brown, buff, and 1,000 other colors too. But typically the hens are the Great Danes. They don't realize how big they are. Or they're the opposite of that. They know they're big, they know they're intimidating, and you better watch out. So I've seen a lot of the roosters be that way, where they're like, I'm in charge. And you just got to remind them every once in a while that they're not. The hens tend to lumber along. They're not very aggressive. They know they're big. They don't want to do a lot of work. So they're not gonna roost in your trees. You're not gonna have to try to get them down out of your trees or anything like that. They're way too big for that. And they're feather-footed, so they are typically a little more cold hardy. The feather-footed birds do have that protection of their legs. I like these because they're big. Even though they're big, they don't use a lot of resources. They don't eat a ton of feed, whereas like a turkey would, for example. But I just find them to be great personality, especially the hens. And then Wyandottes, that's one of my favorite breeds. This is a golden lace Wyandotte. This is a Bantam too, but imagine that 5 times bigger. And that's your Wyandotte. They are a breed developed in Ohio. On the profile, they're shaped like the state of Ohio, if you're familiar with your geography, a little bit. And I'm from Ohio, so I like to tote that one. They were developed in Ohio as well. But the Wyandotte is a very docile breed, and they're very popular. Blue lace red Wyandottes are like the most sought after chickens at a hatchery because they're very beautiful. So instead of black lacing here, it's a blue slate color, and in the sun they just are beautiful, absolutely beautiful. If a chicken could be beautiful. All right, so then we've got barn builders here. That's another pattern bird. They are double laced, so you can see 2 types of lacing there. This was just a really cool photo, I think. But they do look like that. They're again a docile breed. They're kind of on the same spectrum as the Wyandotte. Big birds. They don't have a lot of gumption. They're not going to get into stuff. They're usually pretty docile. And then the Dorking, again, another of the rarer breeds. There's several colors of Dorking, but silver here is probably the most popular. They have 5 toes as opposed to 4, which is neat. This is an old man. Actually, I know this chicken personally. He's an old man. This is actually for P. Allen Smith. Anybody familiar with P. Allen? I used to work with him when I lived in Arkansas and help him select his breeders. And that was a really, really cool experience for me because I am a nerd. Can you tell? I grew up watching the Weather Channel, and P. Allen Smith was on the Weather Channel, and he had beautiful gardens and he talked about his chickens. And I told my dad, I want to do that someday. Look at me now. So I did get to work with Alan, and that was an incredible experience. His gardens are beautiful. I was always afraid I'd kill something when I went down there, but his chickens are cool too. And we bonded over that. But this guy is still living and a very, very old man, and still productive. We still get chicks out of him. So that's neat too. But they're short guys. They have very, very short legs and a deep, deep body. They're another English breed that was developed to look like this, but I like Dorkings. I think they're pretty docile as well. The females tend to be very broody. So if you want chicks, this would be the breed I'd suggest. Again, might be a little more hard to find. Then you got the goofy ones, and I'm a softie for a goofy one. I've always liked naked necks. I think they're funky. They're for as little feathers as they have on their head, they are extremely cold hardy. So they were developed in, they're called Turkins, but they were developed in the Middle East. And these birds are extremely cold and heat tolerant because they can release heat from their necks. They're goofy little things, and as chicks, they're even goofier, I promise. They're little things with no feathers on, they just look out of place, especially in a brooder full of normal chickens. But my niece raises naked necks, band of naked necks, and we have pictures of her. I should have put these in here, of her at 18 months with just her flock of white naked necks. The cutest thing is a tiny, cute little baby, and then these sad looking chickens. Polish, I wouldn't really consider these a heritage breed, or sorry, a dual purpose breed, but they can be used, especially the males can be used for meat. Most of the time, they're going to be your sailboats, deep bodied, but very thin. The issue here is they can't see so well. I just had a conversation with a lady who lost a bunch to a hawk because they can't see so well. So they're best kept. That's a great picture, Polish in the forest, but not best kept outside. They can't see well. They're really prone to predators. I actually raised buff laced ones when I was a kid, snuck up on one and killed it because I snuck up on it. They're also not particularly intelligent creatures. It's because they can't see so good. Now, this poor lady over here, they really should have got a better picture of her. And I have better pictures of Faverolles. I just couldn't find them when I was making this. But this is a Faverolles. It's a French breed, feather-footed, 5 toes, also bearded. I think they're cute. Even the females, I think they're cute because they look like little owls. She's kind of dumpy looking today. I don't know why that picture is what they use on the website at mypetchicken.com, but normally her tail would stick up. She'd look a little more peppy, but they are very docile. A lot of my 4-H kids raise Faverolles because kids can, flip them upside down, pick them up, carry them around by the neck. They're, how kids can be with animals, and they tolerate that really well. And the males are a very striking bird. They have a lot of colors on them. The females are a little more muted, but like I said, very docile. Great for kids too. So our dual purpose and heritage breeds, I say finish in 20 weeks. I think that's more realistic than 16, especially when we're talking about Buckeyes. So that's a Buckeye male. That bird is probably closer to almost a year old, just because this is a show flock that I got this picture from. They take a long time to finish because they're putting on all that frame and all that bone mass before they're adding muscle. When they're outside, just like any other type of livestock, they're building muscle, walking around, looking for bugs, looking for things to get into, like your garden, your neighbor's yard. Birds typically don't respect property lines at all. That's why if you're raising them outside, I always recommend that you have some sort of fencing. If you have neighbors that don't like chickens, which lots of people do, for as many people like chickens, there's probably just as many that don't. They really should be contained at least at some point. And you always want to contain them at night, because then they're just hawk bait, mink bait, any other type of fur bearer bait. I don't know how's your bear population around here? Is it as steady as it is in Juniata County? So a couple years ago, the Game Commission was actually indemnifying or providing money for people whose coops were taken out by bears. So they would have to. The Game Commission didn't know much about chickens, but they knew a whole lot about bears. So they would get rid of the bear, and then I don't know what they did with them. In my heart, they took them to a farm upstate. But then they'd call me and say, okay, this person had this many chickens and they were about this old. Can you plug that into your spreadsheet and tell me how much they were worth? I'm like, well, there's a lot of factors here, but I had a pretty average price. Now, during COVID, those prices went way up and the Game Commission didn't like that very much. And they're hard to find now. Chickens are expensive. But yeah, they were indemnifying for bears. We were talking earlier, the Game Commission is working on a marten reintroduction project. So martens are of the weasel family, but they are not near as friendly to humans and to civilization as weasels are. So the poultry community and the backyard poultry community specifically kind of balked at that. They did not want more predators nearby. And the places that they were reintroducing these martins or planning to, were being developed anyway. They were set to be developed in the next 20 years. So the martins were going to lose their habitat. If they're not super friendly to humans and to civilization, there was going to be that interface and some heartburn, I think, between both the martins and the humans. So it was just a bad thing all around, a bad planning part all around. So I think they're holding off on the martin reintroduction, hopefully for a good long time. I think there's plenty of predators out there in Pennsylvania, personally. I'm telling Sarah earlier, a mink bought our farm twice. It was like Passover. It missed all the birds that had just been to the fair, so all my birds, and it killed all my dad's. We have some really, really high value show chickens. So that was a heartbreaker, to watch an animal come in at the middle of the night through a knot hole about this big in our coop and take out probably $5,000 worth of chickens. And just killed them for sport. I mean, just left them dead. Luckily, we had quite a bit of chicks that were hatching, but oh man, that was terrible. Great horned owl took out my entire duck flock one summer. There was a lot of tears on that one, especially when, I was a feral child, so I like to walk in the woods, and I found where the owl had dropped all my ducks, and I found all the skeletons. That was not a good day for old Emily. I cried a lot, still cry a lot. I cry when we send beef cattle to slaughter too. So none of that's changed. I'm still very soft hearted. But so our dual purpose breeds, to get back to my not clover bud stories that I like to tell, they're going to finish in a long time. So don't expect them to finish in 42 days. I think that's the problem that some folks, they get into heritage breeds, or they like the colored breeds. They like the patterned birds. They like the funky looking ones. And it takes them so long that by the time they're penciling out their investment, they've had a year's worth of feed in these birds. And it is cheaper to go buy your chicken at the store, where it is cheaper to go buy your eggs at the store. And by and large, yes, it is. But do you get the same enjoyment from going to Wegmans and picking out your dozen eggs as you do from sitting on your porch, drinking your coffee and watching your chickens? Probably not. Now, when your birds get into your garden and eat all your green beans, or they eat your tomatoes, that enjoyment might trickle off very steep and very quickly. It's happened to me before that birds have gotten into stuff. My guineas got into the barn one day, and the cows were climbing the walls because they've never seen a guinea before. And boy, did I hear it, because my husband is not a chicken person. He married the wrong lady. I keep telling him that. But I wanted to marry a rich farmer, and I married a dairy farmer, so I failed too. But, so yeah, our guineas got in one day, and he said, "All right, the guineas need to go." I said, "No, don't get rid of them. They're so nice, and they keep the bugs down." And about 2 weeks later, the neighbor brought them all down because they had gotten in the road. So we had some very flat guineas brought home, but it was nice that the neighbor brought them down. I thought, I'm like, oh, that's too bad. And when I attempted to replace them, I was quickly reprimanded for my investment. I bought 60 chicks at Tractor Supply and said, "Hey, look, we got guinea keats." And my husband went, "No, you don't. Pack them up. Better find a 4-H kid." Okay, fine. Luckily I did. So every kid in Juniata County got one guinea keat. Just pass them out like candy at meetings. So the Livestock Conservancy has a list of threatened and critically threatened breeds, just like we do for a lot of our wild animals. So you can see some of these birds that are rather popular in the pictures that I showed you over here recovering. So they get their numbers from the American Poultry Association, American Bantam Association, and you can self-report on their website how many birds you have in your flock and their breeds. So here we have a mix of Bantam breeds, large fowl breeds, and some breeds that are more on the what I would call new end of things. So the critical ones here are birds that you very rarely see. We have Hollands, Hubalays, the Javas, model Javas, like I showed pictures of. Excuse me, booted are Bantams. They're booted. They have the boots. They have feathers on their feet. They're very cute, but they're very rare. LaFletch are a more egg type breed, but they have a V-shaped comb, so they're a little neat looking. But again, very rare. Just the genetic propensity for these is very small. And the families that we have in the US are rather inbred. So finding new blood as a breeder is really difficult. The threatened ones, we do see a few, New Hampshires, large New Hampshires, are really rare. Houdans typically are very aggressive. I don't know what it is about them. They're just mean, or maybe it's because they're French. I don't know. Langshan's are an Asian breed with feathers on their feet. They're a big bird that require a lot of resources. So whereas the Brahmas don't eat a lot, Langshan's will eat you out of house and home. My dad has a feed customer that buys a ton of feed a week. He has a flock of 40 Langshan's, and man, do they eat like crazy. I actually raise Sultans. I raise Bantam Sultans, but right now they're about halfway between large fowl and Bantam because they're not the right size. But my Sultans are, like again, I said, I'm a sucker for the goofy ones. They're feather footed. They have 5 toes. They have beards, muffs. So they have ear tufts around their ears, and they have a crest. They're the hardest things in the world to raise. They're mite magnets. So they have bugs all the time, but darn it if they're not so cute. They're just cute little things. And they're funny, and they kind of coo at you. They don't really cluck. They don't, the roosters don't crow. I should have put pictures in here of my lovely little birds. But they're fun. They're fun as chicks. They're very curious. They get out of my brooder all the time, and my cat is terrified of them. He's not a very good cat. He's more like, he's just there. He's not very, he doesn't get mice. He doesn't do much other than lay in sunspots and annoy my child. But the birds, when they get out of the brooder in the house, he doesn't know what to do with himself, and they love to come up to him and scare him, and that's good for him. So I love my Sultans. It was a breed that when I first flipped open the Standard of Perfection as a kid, I looked at those and I said, Dad, these are cool. He was like, oh boy, we got our hands full. She doesn't like the normal chicken. She likes the weird ones. So, modern games, and I think there's Old English games. Yeah. I have the caveat there of large fowl. Old English and modern games are our largest breeds in the Bantam size, because they're easy to raise and they're small. In the South, if you go to a chicken show, Old English games are everywhere. These are what we would consider our avian athletes. If you see me winking, and they're what folks have used in the past for fighting chickens. They're very gamey. They're very aggressive, especially the males. The females, not so much. They tend to be pretty broody, but they're very protective of their chicks. So the large fowl varieties of these are really going by the wayside. They're hard to raise. They require a lot of resources, and they're very aggressive. Now, the avian athlete raisers that we don't talk about, they don't like birds that are aggressive. They don't like man fighters. So if they have man fighters, they usually go in a coal pen. And I'll tell you, for as much as we think that that's a horrible thing that we're doing, those birds are better taken care of than your dog. They are pampered, unfortunately, for what their intended purpose. The watch list here, that is the birds that we do see every once in a while. Rhode Island whites, I would say, are almost extinct. It's been 20 years since I've seen a good Rhode Island white. Now, hatcheries are selling them. That doesn't mean that they're purebred, 1, or 2, the right shape and type or size. So that's for chickens. There are also heritage ducks and geese. And I didn't really get into that because I only had an hour, and you don't want to be here all day, right? So heritage ducks and geese, our Ancona duck is there. These are all pretty, I would say, popular. They're on the watch list, but that's because it requires a lot of resources and a water source to raise ducks and geese. So Indian runner ducks, that's what I raised when I was a kid. They're the ones that stand up like penguins. I love them. They're just goofy. Like I said, I'm a sucker for the goofy ones. I also raised Pomeranian geese, and they were better watchdogs than our livestock dogs. So I very much appreciated them. There wasn't much that got into our barnyard when the Poms were around, including me. I was a little afraid of them. So Steinbacher geese, they are a German breed that were imported more recently, but heritage to Germany. I think they're really neat. They're a wild type goose color, so they almost look like a snow goose, maybe like a snow goose that rolled in the mud. So they have a bit of brown to them, but they have a black band around their bills, so it makes them look like they're wearing lip liner. I think they're cute, but they're coming back. There's a lot of folks, I think a few folks in Michigan that are kind of a coalition of raisers trying to import genetics directly from Germany and other parts of the world where they're raising them and they're more popular. So they're coming back, but they are critically threatened as far as numbers in the US. And then our turkeys, which is pretty much everybody but the commercial white turkey. My dad's raising Beltsville small whites. Right now my daughter's name's Molly. He calls them Molly's turkeys. And it'll be a cold day before those Molly's turkeys come to Pennsylvania. So I'm not raising turkeys. I did it once and I'm never doing it again. They were the messiest birds I ever raised. But again, I have a very small footprint from where I can keep my chickens and my birds. So turkeys don't fit in that small footprint. They were bored. They got into everything. They were extremely messy. If you have an outside area to raise turkeys, go for it. But those Beltsville smalls, they're like a tiny turkey, and they're really easy to keep for my dad. Turkeys, for the most part, are easy keepers if you have enough space for them. The minute that they get bored, they get problematic. This is the best way to put that. So that's pretty much all I have on heritage breeds. I know you probably have lots of questions and I'm happy to answer them. They don't have to be about heritage breeds, but hopefully they're about chickens. So just thank you guys so much for having me out. It's always nice to get out of the house because I have a 9-month-old and I don't do that often. And yeah, we'll take any questions. Do we have any on Zoom? I don't know if they, okay, yeah, feel free to type them in, or if they want to unmute or do whatever they need to do to shout them out. So any questions? I love stories because I got one probably to match. Yeah. Oh yeah. What was I say? Oh, that's okay. Here, while you're telling your story, I'm getting a drink.
Right. So, what's this one?
Here. Yeah, you can just go around.
It's not that long of a story. I grew up in a poultry farm. My dad used to have white leghorns and for eggs, and they were sexed, so you get 1,000 chicks, and there's a few roosters made it through, and he raised them out in the range. They were totally out in the range until they were put inside the pens for laying. And so the pastime as a kid, I used to train these roosters to attack. And you can do that. There's a little vocabulary that roosters have, and you can kind of mock that vocabulary. They get mad, and then if you kind of retreat and kind of run, they chase you, and pretty soon you can train them that as soon as they see you, they come tearing at you in a fury. So
This is what I did to my geese.
this was good sport for a kid. And one day we had visitors, some distant relative from the city, and he exploded out into the chicken yards, into the shelters where they were, and chasing them in all directions and having just a ball. This is not done. Anyway, so the adults were in the house for a few minutes, a little while. Well, got really quiet outside. And eventually somebody went looking for him. Here the roosters had him pinned against a wall. He was terrified. And he came in with the adults, and then he sat very quietly beside the adults for the rest of the time that they were there. And that's my story on it.
Well, that's a good one. That's great.
But predators, chickens out in the range, they're like magnets for red foxes, great horned owls, raccoons, and everything else. So,
Yeah,
what is that?
once those predators figure out they can't get away,
Yeah.
chickens don't fly, and they can jump and they can parachute down, but they can't get away at any real distance. So unless you have some sort of protection, whether that be physical protection of a coop or companion protection of livestock animals, or a really mean goose or a really mean rooster, they're pretty much defenseless. And that's, a lot of folks have issues with predators, and the best way I can tell you is to prevent that is to lock them up. And even then it doesn't help because raccoons can dig under things. Lots of those fur bearers can dig, and they'll find their way in when they know that there's a snack available, unfortunately. So, yeah.
Actually, I have 3 questions.
Okay.
There
That's
we
good.
go. And I have a chicken that is.
I can work on that.
Not really about heritage, but I have a, female hen
Mhm.
that likes to not other hen,
Ah, yeah.
and I was curious about. Like, she was that.
Yep. She's trying to assert her, yeah, oh, yeah, sure. So she's got a hen that's mounting other hens. So she's trying to assert dominance on her flock, so she's probably the dominant hen in your flock. I would be curious as to whether or not she's laying eggs. So do you have a way to count? Or a way to, we use it trap nests in commercial birds, but where you actually trap the bird in the nest to see if they laid an egg, and you don't let them out till they do. Now, I don't recommend that for small flocks, but if you have 10 hens and you're getting 9 eggs, that might be, the curious thing might be is if where'd you get them from? That might be the better question. Did you get them from Tractor Supply or hatchery or something?
I did.
Okay.
I was doing it. We were.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. If they're all.
Okay, yeah, so our commercial hatcheries, like you were saying about sex slips, we get males that slip out. Every once in a while, we will have females that have too much testosterone, and if we were to do a fun science experiment and sacrifice her for science, open her up, I bet she would have male reproductive parts too. Yeah, chickens are weird. They're fun, but they're weird. Yeah, so they have, and a lot of that is because if you think about us, 9-month gestation, chickens have a 21-day gestation, hatching period, incubation period. So we can produce a ton in a short period of time. And because a lot of our genetics are family related, we see a lot of those weird genetic anomalies. When I worked in a commercial hatchery, all of my employees knew to alert me when they found something weird because I was gonna take a picture of it. And they're like, then it was, are you gonna open it up, see what's in there? And I'm like, come on, guys, can we go for break? It was multi-headed chickens, chickens that had more than 2 legs. That was one of the news stories that always cracked me up when I was in college, that KFC was going to produce birds that had more legs and more wings. Like, okay, yeah, you know how many of those hatch? You know how many of them survive one? Actually, when I was in clever bud story time, when I was in my master's program, I had a chick that hatched out with 3 legs, and I kept him for 13 weeks. His name was Tripod because he had one out the back, and a lot of that is incubation temperature. There's a lot of science behind why those things happen, but at the end of the study, I opened Tripod up because he sacrificed his body for science, and found out that he actually had 3 different digestive tracts. So at some point in the differentiation of his cells, when he was developing in the egg, he was probably going to be triplets. And then he absorbed those others and ended up like that. Now, like I said, he lived for 13 weeks and it was a broiler, so he was doing pretty good. And he lived a pampered life, let's be honest. I took care of him. I hand fed him. He was my buddy. But he knew he was going to be sacrificed for science that day because he did not want to be caught. I was chasing him around for a while. But yeah, so some of those weird genetic anomalies happen, and it's because we can raise so many in such a short period of time. And the genetic pool is not very deep sometimes, especially for Americanas, because there's not a lot of different strains of genetics. So, and they're just a goofy little bird anyway, too. They're cute, they're fluffy, and the eggs are pretty. Most of the time the eggs are pretty. So, yeah. Oh yeah, sorry, you had a whole bunch of other questions. It's okay.
My research has like this membrane that comes over.
These are questions I can answer. I'm getting excited.
There's like a membrane that goes over the eye, which doesn't. Also
yeah.
What?
Yeah. So another one of those Jeopardy questions that you can use for never. So the membrane of the eye, chickens actually have 3 different eyelids: top, bottom, and then what we call the nictitating membrane. It's an adaptation from flight from other birds. So think about when a hawk's soaring through the air, or those turkey buzzards that are flying drunk through the air. They have to have the ability to see while they're doing that. So that thin membrane protects their eyes from drying out or from debris. Sometimes birds can get dust or shavings or some sort of debris behind that nictitating membrane, and it'll get inflamed and you'll really be able to see it. But if you just sit and watch them, they have this thin, colorless, clear membrane that just protects their eyes from drying out. If you ever get in a staring contest with a chicken, that's how they win most of the time. But yeah, perfectly normal, and it's just an adaptation from flight from other birds.
So they all do that.
Yeah, it might be more prominent, and that sometimes males have just bigger eyes, so it's easier to see. But yeah, most chickens do have them. There's a few breeds that don't, just because they're strange. Yeah.
And then, talk about
Mhm.
and also I haven't lost since.
Mhm. Oh boy, yeah. Yeah, you might be on a watch list somewhere. So the question is, she has a rooster, and we talked about township ordinances. There are several townships that are getting a lot looser about that because they see the benefits to people getting back to our heritage and raising birds of your own. And there are people who are just anti-chicken. There are commissioners and township supervisors, borough people who are just anti-chicken, and that's their prerogative, but they have to, as elected officials, in my opinion, they have to see through that. They have to see through their own prejudices. I am not a dog fan. I had dogs growing up. I'm a cat person. I like to stay inside. I don't like getting up in the middle of the night and letting a dog out. It's just not my thing. But my parents have 2 dogs. They have a corgi and a dachshund who are obstinate and do not listen and are a pain in the butt. But do I love them? Absolutely. I love them when they go back home. So, but I can respect that other people like dogs. So I think that needs to apply to chickens when it comes to townships. But when I give a small flock talk, when I'm talking about getting into chickens, the first thing I say is check with your township. If there's no ordinance, check again and talk to it. Like, usually you can pull these things up online. Most of Pennsylvania's boroughs, townships, and local municipalities have all of their ordinances online. You got to filter through the legalese there because a lot of it doesn't make sense. But yeah, there's been people who have been fined up to $5,000 because they had chickens, and there's not a $5,000 bird on the planet. So yeah, if your township says that you shouldn't have roosters, they're probably gonna make you get rid of them, but I'll cross my fingers for you. Because sometimes people are like, oh, look, pretty chicken. Other people are like, she's got a rooster. It's the end of the world. And most of the time, yes, a male will prevent predators. The male will prevent a lot of hardship on your flock, just because they're going to protect their girls. And like you said, chickens they can communicate with each other just as much as they can communicate with us. Usually a crow is, hey lady, come feed me. Hens will cluck right before they lay an egg. Males will do a dance and make some specific noises before they go to mount a hen. This happens at chicken shows. So a lot of these are in big arenas. If a pigeon flies over, all the birds will go just to alert each other that, hey, there's something up ahead. And usually that's when the Polish hit the top of the cage, freaking out. And that's why they get picked off first. But yeah, so they communicate with each other. And that's probably what your rooster's doing, letting the hens know, hey, there's an aerial predator, there's something around. You guys all need to come over here. And they do the same for food. If you've ever.
Very stressed out.
Yeah. And that's the thing. He's probably like, okay, where are they? 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like a kindergarten teacher counting heads. Yeah.
Can I add one more question?
Sure.
So do you have advice for, I mean, he's a pretty different breed, he's like one of those strains you said that I got.
Mhm.
It's called very well.
Yeah.
I have one, but I have a bunch of different, so.
Mhm.
Will they all just come out as
Yeah, they'll be mixed
weird
breed.
little
Yeah.
butts?
Pretty much. So you're, if you have those Americanas, likely their chicks will lay blue eggs because that's a dominant gene. So you're going to perpetuate that. They might have some little semblances of beards if your male doesn't have it. Yeah, they come out in a million different colors. But that could be really cool too. For as much as you might want to perpetuate the genetics that you have, it's cool to see what they can make. So like my sultans are all white. Every once in a while, I'll get a gray chick to hatch out. And then as the last one was a male, as he ages, he carries a silver gene. And that's why he's gray when he hatches out. But I breed him back to all my females. He makes the whites whiter. He's like what was that? Woolite for chickens. He makes all my whites. They come out with every once in a while, there'll be solid black feathers in the females. And I know to keep them because they're going to eliminate any other genetics that they have. Chicken genetics it's a whole study, but it's neat to see what kind of colors you can get. For me, it's if you have those, I call them Heinz 57. There's a little bit of everything in there, and they're cool. Otherwise, you'd have to be very specific about when he's exposed to certain hens, and that becomes a challenge too, because he's probably going to do whatever he wants, especially if he's nervous anyway. Yep. All right. Any other questions? Yeah.
Expand upon the difference between Americanas and the Aracanas.
Yeah.
That's very controversial, and I think
Yeah. So an Americana was not developed in America. They're actually Australian. I don't know why they're called that, but they have a beard, a full beard. So it should have 3 parts. There should be 2 parts on the side, like mutton chops, and then the actual beard. Those birds have a tailbone, so there's presence of an actual tail. They will have tail feathers. They lay a blue-green egg, just like an Araucana or an Araucana, either way. They are traditionally rumpless, so they have actually no tailbone, no pygostyle. So there's no feathers that can grow from there because they don't have it. They only have feathered tufts, so they'll have these 2 or 3 little weird feathers coming out of the ear tufts. So chicken ears are covered by a little flap of feathers. The tufts are just modified ear feathers. So yeah, the difference is the tailbone, really, and then the beard versus the tufts. Yeah, but they both lay a tinted egg, whether that's blue, green. Some people say that they can get almost a yellow, like a highlighter yellow egg out of some birds. But yeah, that's all. They're the same but different in as far as the eggs that they lay. And I know we're low over time, so we can wrap that up. And if you guys have questions, otherwise, I'll stick around for a little while and we can answer them. Thanks so much. You want me to stop share? And end or all right.